Hello students, today we'll discuss about the important pteridophyte that is called as Adiantum, which is commonly called as maiden hair fur. Why it is called maiden hair fur? Because the petiole of the leaf appears like the black hairs of the ladies. That is why it is called as maiden hair fur. So in this topic we will be discussing about the habit, habitat, anatomy and the reproduction in case of the Adiantum. So first we'll discuss about the classification of the Adiantum. This Adiantum is placed under the kingdom Plantae, division Pteridophyta, subdivision Pteropsida, class Leptosporangiate, order Filicales, family Adiantaceae and the genus Adiantum. Coming to the occurrence or the distribution of this Adiantum, Adiantum is a large genus which consists of about 200 species which are distributed in the tropical and temperate regions across the world. And in India, about 10 species have been reported. Among them, Adiantum caudatum, Adiantum capillus veneris, Adiantum venusitum, Adiantum lunulatum and Adiantum ethiopium are some of the species which are found in India. So this is how actually the leaves of the Adiantum plant appears, and you can find in the middle portion, that is the central axis of the leaf or the petiole which you find here, as it appears the dark black or black color, it is called as what? The maiden hair fur. So in the next aspect we will be discussing the morphology of the plant. So we'll move to the next slide, that is about the external morphology or the sporophyte. You know very well what is sporophyte. Especially in pteridophytes, the dominant phase is said to be sporophyte. The plant body is called as sporophyte, which is mainly differentiated into three regions. The first region is called as the rhizome. The first portion is the rhizome. The second part is the leaf. So here the leaf is said to be frond, F-R-O-N-D, frond. Frond means the broad leaves which are dissected arising from this rhizome, especially in case of pteridophytes, are said to be the fronds. So the second part is the leaves. The third part is, that is from the lower portion of the rhizome, the roots which arises, that is the, or that comprises the third part of the plant. That means in a single statement I can say the sporophyte is mainly differentiated into three parts. The first part is said to be rhizome, the second part is said to be roots, and the third part is again said to be the leaves. And when you talk about this rhizome, rhizome is sometimes said to be subterranean, sometimes it is said to be creeping, but in sometimes it may be sub-erect. So we say rhizome is subterranean. So subterranean rhizome means sub, partial, terranean means below the soil, partially inside the soil and partially above the soil. Then the rhizome, that is when the stem is present partially inside the soil and partially above the soil, then it is called as subterranean. You can find here the rhizome is subterranean and creeping in the species called as Adiantum capillus veneris, Adiantum pectinatum. Whereas in Adiantum pedatum, the rhizome is said to be sub-erect. You know very well, erect means straight, sub-erect means somehow I can say oblique or partially erect is called as sub-erect. Whereas in Adiantum caudatum, the rhizome is said to be erect, which is placed very straightly. And the next part of the plant are the leaves. So leaves, as I already said, leaves are said to be fronds, and especially the leaves are said to be pinnately compound leaf. You know the difference between the simple leaf and the compound leaf. When the leaf lamina is entire, when it is not dissected into any leaflets, it is called as the simple leaf. But when the leaf lamina is dissected into many leaflets, then it is said to be compound leaf. And you know very well, in compound leaf mainly two types you are going to find: pinnately compound leaf and palmately compound leaf. Whereas in this Adiantum, the type of the leaves which we find are said to be pinnately compound leaf. Pinna means hair, so you can find. So what I am drawing here is the rachis, main axis of the leaf, to which what the leaves are attached along the rachis, which appears like the hair. That is why the leaves are said to be pinnately compound leaf. In case of Adiantum caudatum, the leaves are said to be unipinnate. In Capillus veneris, the leaves are said to be bipinnate. In Venusitum, the leaves are said to be 3 to 4 pinnate. So in the next slide, I am going to tell you what are these unipinnate, bipinnate, and 3 to 4 pinnate. So you are going to find in this slide. So here you will find unipinnate leaves, bipinnate leaves, and the tripinnate leaves. So unipinnate leaves means you can find here. So I'll tell you, I am going to take the previous slide here. Unipinnate. So unipinnate means here is the main rachis. If to this the leaves are directly attached, they may be sessile or they may contain the petiole. This type of leaf is said to be unipinnate. Sometimes what happens, it is the main axis which again shows the branching like this. So I can call it as what these are the primary branches. So this is the main axis. So in this slide you can find on the main axis or on the main rachis the leaves are directly attached. In this case it is called as what? Unipinnate. Whereas in the second case I am calling it as what? Bipinnate. Bipinnate means whatever this main axis is there, it is showing the branches like this. If on this branches, primary branches, if the leaves are attached like this, then it is called as what? Bipinnate. Whereas in the third case, here you can find tripinnate. So in this case what happens, you consider it as, here is the main stem, it undergoes branching, primary branching, and then from the primary branches sometimes what happens, the secondary branch arises. To this secondary branch, if the leaves are attached means, then those leaves are said to be the tripinnate. So this is all about what regarding the unipinnate leaf, bipinnate leaves, tripinnate leaves, which we are going to find in case of the Adiantum. And in the previous slide, that is in this slide, the leaves are pinnately compound leaf. Here are some species mentioned: unipinnate, bipinnate, tripinnate, and so on. Now coming to the stalk of the leaf. Stalk of the leaf is called as petiole. The petiole is totally absent in case of the Adiantum caudatum. In this species there is no petiole or there is no stalk for the leaf, and they are said to be sessile. Whereas in case of Adiantum venusitum, the petioles are very short. Whereas in Adiantum lunulatum, the petiole is very long. So in the next slide you can find here. So here you can find, that is in the left picture you find the leaves are directly attached, or sometimes we say the petiole is very short. Whereas on the right side you can find, whereas the stalk of the leaf is very long. So here we say it as what? Petiolated leaves. Here you say it may be sessile or very short petiole is present. You can find the difference here. Very short or no petiole is present. Here the petiole or the stalk of the leaf is very long. So this is all about the petiole of the leaf or the morphology of the leaf. Again you can find one more frond here. And the next, this is what the species of Adiantum caudatum. So you can find the distribution of the leaves over here. The broader, older leaves are present at the base, whereas the younger leaves are present at the top of the rachis of the leaf. And you can also find the distribution or the number of the leaves distributed over the axis. At the bottom, the leaves are arranged very close to each other, which are matured, whereas at the top, the leaves are sparsely placed, or the difference between them is very more. In the next slide, you are going to find the leaves. And one more special feature of the leaves of this, or especially in case of pteridophytes, is we call the leaves as what? Sporophylls. Phyll stands for leaf. Why the leaves are called sporophylls? Because if the leaves contain spore bearing organ, then the leaves are said to be sporophyll. So here in this, at the margin, or the leaves bear margin, at the end of the margin, we are going to find the structures called as sori. So I am going to enlarge the sori here. So this portion is called as, single is called sorus, many we call it as what? The sori. So this is color of the sorus. It is somehow appearing yellow in color when it is young. It appears somehow dark brown or black in color when the spores or the sorus get matured. That is the reason why the leaves are said to be the sporophylls here. And one more thing about this sorus is that whatever the sorus which are present at the end of the margin, leaf margin are there, they are covered by the margins of the leaf, which we are going to call it as what? Flaps. F-L-A-P-S. Reflexed marginal flaps of the leaf. Whatever the sorus are there, sorus are in turn, that is what happens, the leaf margin itself is going to fold over the sorus, and those foldings of the leaf margin over the sorus or sori are said to be the marginal flaps. So this is about the sporophyll. And here clearly you can find regarding the arrangement of the sorus or the sori over the sporophylls. Very matured, folding of the leaf margin over the sorus. When you break open these black colored sori or the sorus, within that you are going to find what? The structures, that is the spore bearing structures, are present inside. And one more thing which you find here in this case are the veins and veinlets, which are running parallel to one another. That is, the veins are running parallel to one another and they are repeatedly forked. They are free, parallel, and they are going to continue into the, here I am going to introduce you one more structure that is called as inducium. Let me, there is some problem here. One more word I am introducing here, that is indusium, inducium. So what is this inducium? So in the previous slide I said whatever these sorus or sori are there, they are covered by the folding of the leaf, which is going to act as wall of the sorus, wall of the sora, or covering over the sori. So that covering of the sorus is said to be what? Inducium. Covering of the sorus is called as the inducium, which protects the spore bearing organs or the spores that are present inside the leaf margin. So this is regarding the morphology of the Adiantum plant. And the next slide, briefly, very briefly, I am going to describe the anatomy or the internal structure of the plant. So first we'll discuss about the root. You know very well, from the rhizome, from the basal part, the roots arises, and when you take this section of the root, mainly the root consists of the epidermis, followed by a very wide cortex, and then the central cylindrical portion. Sometimes what happens, from the epidermal region, the root hairs arises. So here clearly you can find in this slide The outermost region is said to be epidermis. Epidermis is single layered, where you are going to find the barrel shaped parenchyma cells which are compactly arranged. Arising from the epidermal cells, unicellular root hairs we are going to find, but in this diagram I have no, in this picture you are not going to find those, but you can say that unicellular root hairs are present in the epidermis. Next to the epidermis, this portion we are going to call it as the cortex. Cortex is mainly differentiated into outer cortex and the inner cortex. So here you can say the cortex is heterogeneous in nature, that is, it is mainly made up of two types of tissues. Outer cortex is made up of thin walled, loosely arranged parenchyma cells, whereas inner cortex is made up of lignified sclerenchyma tissue. So this is about the cortex. Next is the central cylinder. Central cylinder, as you all know, it is delimited by the boundary that is called as the endodermis. Next to the endodermis, the single layer we are going to find it as was the pericycle, and later in the central portion we are going to find what the stellar portion, which consists of the xylem and the phloem. When you talk about this xylem, we are going to find two larger xylem vessels said to be metaxylem, and then two smaller protoxylem which are going to form what? The arms of the protoxylem. So I can make a statement here, the stellar portion consists of the central metaxylem. These are what the central metaxylem, with the two extending or two radiating protoxylem arms. This is all about in brief regarding the anatomy of the Adiantum root. That is, internally the root consists of single layer of epidermis, wide cortex and a central cylinder. Unicellular root hairs arise from the epidermis. Cortex is differentiated into outer parenchymatous region and inner sclerenchymatous region, which is very narrow. The central cylinder is surrounded by endodermis followed by pericycle, and then the stellar portion consists of metaxylem with two radiating arms of protoxylem. So this is all about the anatomy of the root. In the next slide, we'll discuss about the rhizome, transverse section of rhizome, or when you take the section of the rhizome, how the rhizome appears or what are the cellular details you are going to find. So when we talk about this rhizome, as usual, when we take the section of the stem or the rhizome, it mainly consists of epidermis, hypodermis and the ground tissue. The epidermis here is single layered. Epidermis is single layered. You can find the outermost region which you find here. It is, so here it is labeled as what it is, epidermis, and it is covered by the thick cuticle. Some epidermal cells gives rise to long multicellular hairs. So once again I am going to, the outermost layer of the rhizome is called as the epidermis. Epidermis is single layered, outermost layer, here I am labeling or drawing single layered epidermal cells which are covered by the cuticle. Arising from the cuticle, you find here the multicellular cells or the multicellular hairs arise from the epidermal cells. And then next to the epidermis, we are going to find the region that is called as the hypodermis. You know very well, the hypodermis, below the epidermis, the region which we find is called as the hypodermis. In case of young rhizome, the hypodermal region cells are not lignified, but in case of matured, you can find here, that is hypodermis, you can find some lignified cells here which we call them as what, the sclerenchyma tissue. Whereas in this young rhizome, you are not going to find what, the lignification of this stem, because as and when the rhizome matures, as it needs more strength, the cells in the hypodermal cells become lignified. So what we say whenever we are describing that, next to epidermis is the hypodermis, which is made up of about 4 to 6 layers of sclerenchyma which provide the mechanical strength. Whereas in case of the young rhizome, the hypodermal cells are not thickened. And next to the hypodermis, which we find is the ground tissue. Basically the ground tissue is made up of parenchyma cells. So this is ground tissue, and the next portion which we find here is the stellar portion of the plant. The stellar portion of the plant varies from species to species, or in the same plant itself it varies from one age to another age. That means when the rhizome is young, at that time we are going to find one type of stele, but when the rhizome gets matured later, the one type of stele gets converted into another stele. You are going to find the difference here. That is, when the rhizome is young, the stele is said to be amphiploic saphenostele. What we call the stele which we find here is said to be amphiploic saphenostele, and you know amphiploic saphenostele means in the center xylem is present, on either side of the xylem you are going to find what, two patches of the phloem, because of which you are going to find the different regions. Those are, so here you will come to know, I am going to tell you. So this is xylem. On the xylem, on both the sides you are going to find phloem and phloem. The one which is present outside the xylem is said to be outer phloem, and the one which is present inside to the phloem is said to be what, inner pericycle. Next to that, in case of amphiploic saphenostele, one thing you know, saphenostele means pith is present, and you call it as amphiploic because on both the sides of the xylem phloem is present. Because of this, all the regions you are going to differentiate it into two regions. That is, starting from the outside you are going to label it as what, outer endodermis, outer pericycle, outer phloem, xylem, inner phloem, inner pericycle, and inner endodermis. This is how we are going to differentiate in case of the amphiploic saphenostele. But as and when the rhizome becomes matured, the leaves starts arising. So this is what, say, rhizome. When it becomes mature, what happens, the leaves starts arising from the rhizome. In that case, if you take this section, we are going to find the type of the stele here is the solenostele or the dictyostele. You know very well, solenostele, solo means if only single leaf arises, or if you find only single trace of the leaf, that is called as the solenostele. Sometimes what happens, as and when it starts maturing, many leaves starts arising from the rhizome, because of which when you take this section you are going to find many leaf bases or many leaf traces, and that type of the vascular bundle is called as the dictyostele. In case of the dictyostele, you are going to find what, some other smaller portions of the vascular cylinder, those are called as the meristeles. Meristeles, where we find the meristeles? Meristeles are mainly found in case of the dictyostele. So this is one meristele, second meristele, third, fourth, fifth. In this case you are going to find amphiploic solenostele, that is the stellar portion, that is xylem, phloem, whatever the regions are there, they are entire. But what happens, as and when the rhizome starts maturing, the leaves starts arising like this. So whenever the leaves starts arising, the vascular cylinder which is present over here, all are utilized in forming the leaves. So there you are going to find the breaking of the vascular cylinder. So you can find here broken vascular cylinders, here you are going to find some gaps, and because of the breakage of the vascular cylinders, you are going to find some smaller units of the vascular cylinders inside the stele, and those smaller units of the dictyostele which arise due to the formation of the leaves when the rhizome gets matured are called as what, the meristeles. So this is regarding the TS of the rhizome, and this is how the solenostele. So I said in mature rhizome you find solenostele or sometimes dictyostele. When it is solenostele, if only one leaf base, so you find only one leaf gap, only one gap is there, and that means from here only one leaf is arising. Sometimes if many leaves arises means that time you are going to call it as what, the dictyostele. But in this slide what you find, it is solenostele. If many leaves arises means that is called as the dictyostele. Next, TS of petiole. So what is petiole? You know very well. Petiole is the stalk of the leaf. When you cut or when you take the transverse section of the petiole, what it consists of? As usual, it consists of epidermis, which is single layer covered by a thick cuticle. You can find over in this, that is labeled here, cuticle over the epidermis, which is present over the epidermis. In some species, say for example in Adiantum caudatum, we are going to find the presence of some multicellular hairs over the epidermis, but in this diagram that is not shown. Next to the epidermis, we are going to find the region that is called as the hypodermis. Here hypodermis is made up of sclerenchyma, which provides the mechanical support to the elongated rachis or elongated axis to which the leaves are attached. Next to the hypodermis, the region which we find here is the ground tissue, which is mainly made up of thin wall loosely arranged parenchyma cells. Sometimes in the ground tissue we are going to find the deposition of the tannin in the cells. And coming to the central part of the cell, that is the stellar portion of the petiole. The central part of the ground tissue is occupied by horseshoe shaped or two arc shaped vascular strands facing with one another, which are surrounded by the layer of endodermis and the pericycle. That is, you find endodermis, that is immediately next to the cortex or next to the ground tissue. The layer which you find is the endodermis. Next to endodermis we are going to find the pericycle, and the pericycle is going to surround a single horseshoe shaped xylem. You are going to find the extension of the arms of the xylem over here. So 3 arms, dark colored 3 arms, somehow lignified xylem vessels we are going to find here. And then in the central part of the arms of the xylem, we are going to find what? The phloem is present. That is here, here, here. We are going to find what? The presence of the phloem. So this is about the TS of the petiole. And in the next slide, we'll discuss about the TS of leaflets. In the previous slide, you studied the TS or the anatomy of the petiole. Petiole is the stalk of the leaf. So here, when you take the section of the leaf lamina, at that time, what are the regions you are going to find? We call TS of leaflet or transverse section of pinna. As usual, when we take the transverse section of the leaves, it consists of 2 epidermal regions, that is upper epidermis and the lower epidermis, which is irregular in outline. The lower epidermis consists of stomata, and the epidermal cells are barrel shaped, somehow elongated, compactly arranged. Whereas on the lower side, we are going to find the stomata for the gaseous exchange, for the transpiration. In between the 2 epidermal region, the tissue which we find is called as the mesophyll. Meso, middle, fill, leaf. Middle portion of the leaf is called as the mesophyll tissue. The mesophyll tissue is homogeneous here, so this part we call it as what? The mesophyll. It is homogeneous in nature, that it is only made up of spongy parenchyma. That means it is not differentiated into palisade and spongy parenchyma. Only we are going to find for the spongy parenchyma. But somehow the cells which are adjacent to the upper epidermis, they appears elongated, which gives them the appearance of the palisade parenchyma, but actually those are somehow elongated, the spongy parenchyma only, which are irregularly lobed. Next portion of the petiole is vascular bundles. The vascular bundles are embedded or they are present in the mesophyll tissue. Each bundle is surrounded by sclerenchymatous bundle sheath. You can find the sheath that covers the vascular tissues or the stellar portion is called as what? The bundle sheath. Bundle sheath is sclerenchymatous in nature, that it is mainly made up of the sclerenchyma tissue. And then the concentric type of ring we are going to find, that is in the center we are going to find the xylem, which is surrounded by the phloem. So this is about the TS of pinna, which I am going to repeat again. That is, you can find here, when we take the transverse section of the leaf, it consists of mainly two portions, upper epidermis and the lower epidermis. On the lower epidermis we are going to find the stomata. In between the two epidermis we find the mesophyll tissue, which is homogeneous in nature, is made up of only spongy tissue. And then the stellar portion, when you talk about the stellar portion, in the center the stele is embedded, which is covered by the sclerenchymatous bundle shape, and in the center xylem is present, that is which is surrounded by the phloem, that is concentric type of vascular bundles we are going to find. So this is about the anatomy of the pinna of the adiantum.